Hi, I'm Marites Vitug, Editor-at-Large of Rappler. Here with us is Vincent Lazatin, convener of the Transparency and Accountability Network, as well as Media Nation, an annual or semi-annual gathering of journalists to reflect on issues affecting the media. Vincent has been following the back and forth between our incoming President Duterte and the media, as well as the controversies that have ensued from the recent press conferences. We are exploring a new terrain in coverage of the presidency. So this morning we will be talking to Vincent about the impact of covering incoming President Duterte, as well as suggestions on how the media can better cover this unorthodox president. So welcome, Vince, to this live interview for Rappler.
Good morning, Marites.
Hi, Vince. So first, maybe let's start with the international group Reporters Without Borders and their suggestion to boycott Duterte's press conferences because of his offensive statements on journalists being legitimate targets of assassination. What do you think?
I think that statement of the president-elect is a very serious comment. I think that's something that media should not take lightly. And I think it would be up to media really to decide on how to deal with that, whether it's a boycott or a blackout. But I think the media must respond to that. It cannot let something like that slide. So a boycott or a blackout would be viable.
The problem, Vince, is that we will be not doing our duty if we boycott the president of the Philippines.
Well, it depends on what kind of boycott we're talking about. I mean, the boycott could be simply don't cover him, and is that for a day, is that for a week, is that for his whole 6 years? Or is it a different kind of boycott? You're boycotting perhaps certain topics or whatever. So there are many ways to slice a boycott.
So it could be also just an individual organization, news organization? Should it be the entire press corps?
I think if it were the entire press corps, it would send a stronger message. That the media would not countenance that kind of talk about killings, and So I think a media-wide kind of boycott would have a much stronger impact. But again, it depends on what kind of boycott we're talking about. There are many ways we can boycott.
There's a parallelism between covering incoming President Duterte and the Republican nominee for President, Donald Trump. And what I'm seeing is that there's lack of follow-up questions among reporters, because I think we are awed or shocked by the outrageous sound bites. So as one, you consume news, you follow news. What's lacking in the press conferences?
I think as regards to covering people like Trump and incoming President Duterte, I think it's time that media kind of accept the fact that this is the way these people are. And if we focus specifically on President-elect Duterte, we know that he's foul-mouthed, that he says, every other word is a cuss word. So I think for now, while initially we're all sort of in awe of that, or not awe, but we're in shock of that kind of language, especially coming from a President-elect. If we are to cover him in a different way, if we are to see him as a completely different kind of president, of political animal, then maybe it's time we get over that and not report on it anymore. So we got over it, we know that he's foul-mouthed, we know about it already, everybody knows about it, so let's not report about that anymore. But let's talk about the substance of what he's trying to say. And as you were saying, really have some solid follow-up questions. So when he says, I'm going to shut down Congress, well, what does that exactly mean, and how's he going to do that? And does he have the military behind him and all of that? So to get over the fact that he's foul-mouthed already, let's not print that anymore, because it doesn't, I think, add to the discussion.
I think that's very feasible for the print and the online reporters. But what if he's covered live on TV and also live streamed on media news websites?
I think this is time for perhaps a new technology to come in that would actually filter these things. I'm sure technology will come a day when technology can automatically bleep that. But until that day comes, I think that's the rather unfortunate situation we find ourselves in, that when we do live coverage or live streaming, there will be no easy way to sort of bleep that out, so that may have to remain for the meantime. till somebody figures something out. There could be like a 20-second delay. I know that there are some instances where people, broadcasters will do like a 20-second delay or 30-second delay, enough time to catch something and bleep it out.
So I think this should be a matter to be discussed by all TV networks and news websites to come up with, should we come up with.
If we apply the old rules, then they're not working, because things are getting said in media that really are not pretty. And it doesn't always have to be pretty, that's not my point, but the point is we don't need to be barraged by this kind of language, and I think people are offended by it. I'm offended to see that coming from a president-elect, but so I think there will have to be new rules drafted by media in terms of how do you cover a president like this. Do you keep on reporting every time he says the F word or whatever, or refers to a woman's private parts or whatever? We don't need to, I think, so if we draft new rules, if media drafts new rules on how to deal with that and what to include and what not to include, and when it's important or critical to the story and when it's not, then at least everyone can be clear about what it is you're reporting.
So you think media is part of the problem? Are we the enablers of, always contributing to this great feeding frenzy?
Yeah, as a convener of Media Nation for many, many years, I think this is something that I've walked away with many times after Media Nation fora, and that is that a lot of times media, willingly or unwillingly, is an enabler of these kinds of people. You shared with us I think it was a New York Times article or someone, media man in the U.S. had written about how he was ashamed of himself and for having really participated in the media circus covering Trump. And media does have, to a large extent, to carry some of the blame. We also know that in the country, and I will give the president-elect some credit on this for calling it out, there is widespread corruption in media, and I think this is something that has to be addressed as well, and that's a very legitimate point that the president-elect has brought out. And so all of these things really are brought to bear. If we are going to cover this new president, draft the new rules, and also I think media has to be a little introspective on the role it plays to enable these kinds of people, whether it's Trump in the U.S. or Duterte here in the Philippines.
Yes, there's a question really in my mind about, yes, let's not cover the extraneous remarks, all these expletives, but isn't that part of his character? Do we stay away from those from the nastiness?
I think we all kind of know it.
Let's not repeat it.
Yeah, let's not repeat it. Not for the next 6 years. We don't have to do it. So, it is part of his character, but again, I think maybe the expletives and the cursing can, we can reduce the coverage of that. Maybe once in a while, just remind the people that he said this, and just to remind ourselves that he's that way. But to report it daily, because he says it daily, like every other word, it's really gonna grate on people.
Also, Vince, you mentioned in one of our conversations that it seems that this is a deliberate strategy of our president-elect, that when he's offended or maybe he doesn't want to answer a question, that he provokes, and then he blames you or he changes the subject.
Yeah, I think this is part of the phenomenon that is Rodrigo Duterte. And this is something that media has to come to terms with, grips with, in terms of how it's going to cover the new president. It does seem, from what I've seen on media and read in media, that he likes to provoke. He likes to say provocative things, and because of that, many times the discussion just spirals out of control, and before you know, you're talking about a woman's vagina
So
when
that
you didn't start.
That means he's avoiding accountability, as you said, by if he can't answer it directly, that's his way of avoiding accountability.
Yeah, when you look at the coverage of Duterte over the last 2-3 months, a lot of times you don't know what he's saying, if it's real, if it's not real, if it's a joke, if it's not a joke. And words coming out of the mouth of a president are gold. Every word that the president says has a meaning, and media and the public will read something into it. So a president has to be very careful about what they say. Now, the president-elect and those around him are saying, well, we should be able to tell the difference between when he's joking, when he's not. And the thing is, we really can't, and I don't think anybody really can. And the point I'd made on this is that when a public official says, oh, he's just joking, oh, you should learn how to understand when he's joking, when he's not joking. The problem with that is that when you can't tell the difference, when the public can't tell, then this public official can escape accountability for his or her words. So if they say something really egregious or atrocious, and there's backlash for it, they say, I was just joking, right? But who's to know, right? You can't use that as an excuse to escape accountability for what you say. And I think this is something that the president-elect has to realize, that his words, he must be accountable for what he says. I mean, if you're just talking about your friends and buddies and you're drinking and you're singing karaoke, you can say anything, but it doesn't really matter.
So I think the media should be very assertive when it comes to statements like that, by saying that, but in the past, sir, you said this,
yes,
but now you're changing your statement to this.
Right.
Or maybe just keep reminding our audiences
that
he changed his statement, that he didn't want to answer it.
Yeah, and we've seen that flip-flopping from President Duterte over the whole period since he became a candidate. And even in his time before he became a candidate, he said many things, and now he's reversed himself. And so the media, I think this is the other thing that talking about following up with good questions, is media has to hold this president accountable for what he says. So if he says something today, and 3 months from now he reverses himself, we have to hold him accountable for what he said today. You can't just let it slide, because if you keep on letting the president get away with it, then you'll never be able to pin him down categorically on policies, on positions, on things like this.
Said, we should come up with new rules of engagement, like take out the extraneous remarks, the expletives. Anyway, we know all those, and just focus on the substance. So would you describe this treatment of our incoming president? How should the media, treat Duterte?
Well, I can understand why media might want to cover everything that he says and all of the expletives and all the cussing, but you might want to treat him like a troll. I mean,
what does that mean?
Yeah, trolls say things just to provoke you, and if you allow the troll to engage you in that kind of discussion, then the discussion spirals out of control. And so if you sort of treat him like that, like he's gonna try to provoke you, but if you don't get provoked and you stay on track in terms of the topics that you're trying to cover, good solid follow-up questions, and make sure that he doesn't get away with not answering those questions, I think that's probably the better way of covering someone like Duterte.
That will be, I think, quite difficult for the media, because, as you know, we like the color, the soundbite, but this will be a discussion point in the Media Nation, upcoming Media Nation. Can you tell us more about the next Media Nation?
Yeah, so we will be convening in the coming months Media Nation 12, which we had originally designed to really cover the topic of Mindanao and how mainstream media in Manila covers Mindanao. But given the change of events in terms of our new president coming from Mindanao and all the things he said of and about media, I think we're going to have to rethink what we're going to talk about in Media Nation 12. And it will, I think, without preempting our partners there, to really focus on a lot of things that the president-elect has said in the last couple of weeks and days about media and killings and stuff like that.
I think one of the issues that Duterte brought up, which is a valid and, as you said, legitimate issue, is corruption in media. Why haven't the media really reported on colleagues who are on the take or who are corrupt? I think you know the answer to this as Media Nation convener.
Yeah, well, it is a bit of a fraternity or sorority, as you might want to call it, and people do sort of protect each other's backs. And that's a good thing when you're under attack, but sometimes it's also a bad thing when one of you or a group of you within that organization are found to be corrupt. And I think there's a reluctance within media to come out with actual names. So you will see on occasion people from media talking about things, but without specific names, or they talk about specific situations without names. And the president-elect said he's going to name names, and I think he should. If he is personally aware of any media personalities that his organization, his group, or campaign has been able to pay, it would be good to come out with those names. There was I don't know if it's still around, I haven't checked, there was a website called Spinbusters, which had attempted to do some of this, but Spinbusters, in my opinion, was a little too biased to be credible. But we do need some of that. We need
Spinbusters name names of people on the take, journalists on the take.
Well, name names in terms of poor journalism. I don't recall it saying anything outly about corruption. But I think this is a topic that we did discuss. I think it was in Media Nation 9 or 10, where we took on this issue quite frontally. And there was a reluctance to really come out with names. I mean, I could say all major media organizations have people in their ranks who are on the take.
I think the responsibility lies with the individual news organizations to clean up their ranks.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that that's the first line of defense, that the media organizations themselves should be the ones that cleanse their ranks.
The group Spinbusters. I think my problem with that is they remained anonymous, so
Yes,
we didn't know
correct.
where they were coming from. But is that the only way media consumers or the industry itself can expose corruption in media?
I think you're right about the Spinbusters. One of the problems was that they were anonymous. Their credibility was also a little under question. I think we had talked in Media Nation about the model that's being used in Cebu. They have a Cebu
A press council.
press council that's composed not only of media but also people from civil society or the public at large. And we had discussed, I think, in Media Nation 9 or 10 when we took up the topic of corruption, that we might want to take off from that Cebu model and really create such a council. Now we know that in media we have various sort of self-regulatory bodies, whether it's a KBP or whatever for broadcast. But I think we should give flesh to that idea that we just discussed in Media Nation, is to really create this council that can really call out the corrupt individuals in media. Because it's about time, because they are there, they're among us. And when I talk to my friends and people, a lot of people are just completely unaware of who are the ones that are on the take and the ones who are not.
So this council will be part of the private sector. It will be a civil society organized.
Yeah,
or
the
driven.
the council would be a joint effort between media organizations and civil society organizations. I think you do need an outside perspective in such a council. It can't just all be media. Because I was saying there's a bit of an old boys club or old sisters club to be gender balanced.
That's right. And also, apart from the council, if we just focus on the coverage of incoming President Duterte, what can civil society do apart from the media coming up with new rules? What can maybe media consumers do about?
I think media consumers should let their media outlets know what they find acceptable and what they don't find acceptable. There's a thinking among media that they dish this out because that's what the public wants. And I would tend to disagree with that. I think public will just consume what it is given because it has no choice. And I think there's space here for citizens and organized groups to provide some feedback to media and say, hey, we don't want to see this on our newspapers every morning or online or even on our television or radio. Because without that, then media is sort of blind and say, oh yeah, well, we sell newspapers and we sell copy and we have a lot of hits because that was our headline today. Well, that's because we have no other choice but to consume it. Mm-hmm. So I think the public's role here is really to feed back to media, to their news organizations, through letters to the editor, to whatever feedback mechanisms there are, to let media know, hey, we don't want this.
Yes, on that note, we really are calling on media consumers, listeners, viewers, readers to engage the media, especially in this new and exciting or maybe interesting times when the media will have to rewrite maybe the rules in covering a very uh, different President Rodrigo Duterte. Thank you, Vince, for giving us the time.
Thank you,
and
Jess.
we hope we'll stay in touch and hope to be part of Media Nation.
Of course.